All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. I want to issue a special welcome to our new viewers in KTVO, ABC, and Northeast Missouri. We're very glad to be on, and especially on this Father's Day edition. And we're here joined by a father, Senator Tom Dempsey, St. Charles County. Senator, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
My pleasure. Good to be back.
Let's start with the biggest issue in the news this week, the minimum wage. The mayor of St. Louis came out with a really bold proposal to move the minimum wage, well, double it actually, to $15. It's been met by a lot of legislative resistance. What's your take?
Well, there's a current state statute which does not allow municipalities to raise their minimum wage, but by calling it a living wage, they're circumventing the intent of the statute. And you're seeing this discussion happen in St. Louis and in Kansas City. It wasn't too long ago that we had a ballot initiative that provided a means to raise the minimum wage in the entire state of Missouri. It was controversial, but it was passed by the people of the state of Missouri. It has an escalator clause in it, which gives a CPI type of adjustment. So I don't see why the mayors of those two cities would need to do something beyond what we already have in place in state law. And the reason why we're concerned about it in Jefferson City is because you've got our two largest metropolitan areas on the borders of our state. And we talk time and time again about we have 8 neighboring states, and what happens on the other side of State Line Road has an impact on how well Kansas City does. And conversely, when Kansas City, Missouri makes it a little bit harder to do business, it's really easy to cross the street for a small business person. And so, and that at the end of the day affects our ability as a state when people make that decision to provide the services that we provide.
Are you open to a conversation about increasing the minimum wage?
As I've said, I think right now it's a solution looking for a problem. Mm-hmm. I think what we have in state law is working. We've had increases, and it's happened in a way that hasn't driven small business people out of business or out of the state of Missouri.
So speaking of Jeff City, there was a story this week about kind of attacking the culture of Jeff City. This one didn't really hit on anything with a legislator. It was more about kind of a personal issue. Is there a concern you have where the media's kind of turned into some kind of TMZ type thing where, you know, the personal lives of people in government are becoming oddly scrutinized?
Yeah, you know, I think all of us who are there, and if you're running for office, you need to know this, is that, you know, you live in a fishbowl. You know, what we do when you make a mistake, it's front page, above the fold news. And, you know, people make mistakes all the time, but, you know, we're in a public service position, so we are, in many cases, held to a higher standard. And that's just something you need to be aware of. Charlie Shields told me when I got into the House, and amongst a group of people, that, listen, if you're at a place and something happens, whether you're a part of it or not, because you're there, you become part of the story. And we happen to be...
Well, certainly true this week. I mean, people were just happened to be there, not doing anything wrong. Is that good for the public discourse, though?
Well, we're in an age right now where there's a voracious appetite for information, and it's who can get the scoop. And you've got, the whispering gallery, or there's a couple other people that kind of cover the information that's not on the news, and instead of reading about what happened, in the chamber today, tomorrow morning, there's this instantaneous need to get information out through Twitter, through other social media sites, and it makes it difficult sometimes to, because you're aware that one wrong statement can be an end to your career, a career that you may have spent a lifetime building a reputation in.
Speaking of that, since the term, people like to dog the term limits era, it's kind of fashionable, especially for liberals, to criticize the era of term limits. You probably stand to leave. You're in leadership in both bodies. You may leave the General Assembly as the most respected legislator of that era. What's something you could tell someone that just got elected to might guard that reputation they have?
Well, think of the long term. And that's one thing I've tried to do, is I'm going to be Tom Dempsey a lot longer than I'm going to be Representative Tom Dempsey, or than Senator Tom Dempsey. And that, because I'm very fortunate in the family that I came from, and the reputation that my family had in St. Charles provided opportunities for me, certainly opened more doors than it closed. And I've tried to keep focused on the fact that I really want my children to have the same type of opportunity. And so it's very important how I conduct myself. Not for just tomorrow, but to think 5 years, 10 years down the road, and when I'll have a life that very well could be outside of politics.
Speaking of that, next time you have one more year in the Senate. In 2016, how do you see the Republican Party shaping up? I mean, you've got someone I think you favor for governor. Is that correct?
Yeah, I endorsed Catherine Hanaway.
Why did you do that?
Because I have experience working with Catherine Hanaway, and have seen the strong leadership that she provided to the state of Missouri during her time as first minority leader of the House, and then as the first female Speaker of the House. But I'll remind people, she was the Speaker because she was the most talented person and exhibited the greatest leadership ability in our caucus at that time.
You think she can beat Chris Koster?
I'd love to see a debate between Catherine and Attorney General Koster.
Roy Blunt, does he get reelected?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Why? I mean, it seems like there's some folks that haven't put this list on the national list of races to watch. Cantor's clearly a qualified opponent. Why does Roy Blunt win, and why is the race now viewed as he's up by a large margin?
I've not seen the polling data. I just think a lot of Roy Blunt and what he's been able to do as a U.S. Senator, and I think he has the best interest of our state in mind when he goes to Washington, D.C., and think he deserves to be reelected. Outside
the governor's race, it seems like the Republican Party is sort of aligning some of their stronger candidates to avoid primaries. It's something the Democrats typically have done and Republicans have been awful at. Has that been something you've been involved in trying to align some of your stronger candidates for statewide office to build a bench to where it's not, where you have a natural person to run, as the Democrats have several statewide office holders?
Yeah, I would say that's one impact of term limits, is as you've got people who are looking at the next office. And when Carl and I were in the House, it worked out. But in many cases, when you see people moving from the House or moving from the Senate to maybe an interest in statewide, it doesn't always work out. And as a Republican, I don't like to see. I guess I'm a Reagan Republican and believe in his 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of other Republicans. And so, I prefer when we can work things out. I think it's stronger for the ticket, but I also believe that someone has the right to run for office if they really have a passion to do it. And that's something that in my leadership role in the Senate, I didn't anoint someone to be the next state senator. I really wanted to provide a process where the strongest candidate would be the one that we would put forward for the general election.
You obviously have one of the most competitive Senate primaries, it looks like, to follow you. Do you just stay completely out of that, or how do you end up picking someone in that?
I know Ann a little bit, certainly worked with Mark. Recently met Bill Eigel, I think, who is already moving forward. Mm-hmm. And, I don't think I'm going to be endorsing anyone. I think that's up for the people of the 23rd District to decide. Speaking
of 2016, you would be a natural candidate that I know people talk about to run for office. Will you be on the ballot in 2016? Have you made that decision yet?
No, I haven't. I don't have any immediate plans. I was interested for a time in looking at the congressional seat that I serve in, or that I live in. But I also, Blaine Luke DeMeyer does a great job. He's moving up in the House in terms of leadership and his ability to influence policy. And, I can do something else if Blaine wants to run for re-election, which he said he does.
Well, isn't that a part of politics, is you can move on and do other things with your career, and then if you want to serve later, it's part of that being a citizen legislator. That people always think, well, when you leave politics, you're done forever. But we've seen several examples of folks leaving the Senate or the House and then coming back and serving at a time that was worked out for their life.
Yeah, I didn't get in it to be a career politician. I have had the good fortune and to represent people of St. Charles in some capacity for the last 17 years. And, I think I'd like to stay involved in public policy, but I haven't decided which path that's going to be.
Well, it's last questions on Father's Day. Obviously, your father is very well known around the state, especially in Republican circles. And would you like to give a shout out to your dad here?
Sure. I would like to wish my father, Ernie, a happy Father's Day. And he's a fantastic guy and very soft-spoken, but has done a tremendous job providing for his family. And if I'm half the man that he is, then I'll be doing okay.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for joining us. And we'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're now joined by our Opinion Maker panel. First of all, our first time on the panel, Dan Engeman with the Soybean Association. Very glad to have you.
Yep, glad to be here.
Aaron Williard, returning Chief of Staff to Senator Sylvie, longtime Republican operative. My taxes theoretically will go down at some point, thanks to your work, right? Tishaura Jones, the City Treasurer of the City of St. Louis. And we have John Hancock, the head of the Missouri Republican Party. And a first-timer, Kurt Witzel, St. Louis committee man, longtime Republican here in St. Louis County.
Glad to be here.
Kurt, we'll start with you. The minimum wage. The cities have a plan to double it. The state legislators saying, wait a minute, we have a law here. What do you think?
I'm a free market guy, and I think the marketplace should dictate what the wages are. If you look at a lot of the different studies that's been done over time, it really doesn't have the effect that everybody thinks it's going to have. And there are already sort of guidelines in place for the state already. I'm not sure why individual cities want to, do their own thing as far as the minimum wage goes.
So, Tishaura Jones, you're an elected official in the city that's kind of led the fight on this. Why do they?
I'm not sure what the magic number is, but I think the bigger problem here is income inequality. And we've been trying to, at least in my office, address the issues of income inequality amongst my staff. When President Obama said during his State of the Union that minimum wage should be $10.10, we rose it to 10.10. But even before that, we noticed that there were several people in the office still making the same minimum wage and hadn't received any raises even for their years of working with the office. So we're looking at our staff to make sure that they're making a livable wage, that they're able to take care of their families, and that they also have benefits to take care of themselves when they're sick.
John Hancock, is the City Hall the place at a minimum wage?
No, it's a ridiculously bad idea. And, you know, if a person does $15 worth of work in an hour, they should make $15 an hour. And if a person does $10 worth of good in an hour, they should make $10 an hour. And the market, as Kurt Witzel said, will set that rate. What you're going to do in the city of St. Louis is you're going to take a city that's already hurting. And you know, I know the desire to help people is real, and Treasurer Jones, I applaud what you're doing in your office, but it's going to end up hurting the very people it's intended to help by eliminating jobs in a very depressed part of our state.
Aaron, does this start a debate in Jeff City about the minimum wage?
Well, I think they already, have had that debate some this session, but I think that, there's been some good points already made. I mean, when you're talking about $15 an hour, that's almost twice what you currently have. There's going to be a lot of employers, small employees. The biggest cost for a lot of businesses is labor. And so when you're talking about doubling that cost, it's going to impact a lot of small businesses. And in the city, it might be a decision that they have to go from 2 employees down to 1. Because that's what it is, and that's not going to help their productivity. It's not going to turn things around. I think that we absolutely want to see, more people, making more money, but I don't think that trying to give a policy prescription like this is the right way to do it.
Dan, you're a longtime veteran observer of state and federal politics.
Correct.
If there is something set in place now that raises the minimum wage, is this a win for the mayors?
Is it a win for the mayors?
And I'll ask you this, do you think the minimum wage will end up rising because of this discussion?
I'm not sure. I think time will tell what will happen here. From what I've heard around this table and just observing politics, I don't know that this sort of effort is going to be very successful.
Well, while we have you here, there's an issue that everybody's talking about. In St. Louis, we almost have too much water. Other parts of the country have none. Walk us through the issue from the federal level about water.
Yeah, you just look outside our window here and see the need for drainage across the state, and our soybean farmers are struggling to get their crop in. They'll get it in as long as they get good weather, but the federal government has given us a gift per se, and I'm being cynical here because they sought to clarify federal water rules. They thought they were going to give them clarity to the issue. In turn, they've looks like this final rule that they issued in late May just greatly expanded the federal reach of the Clean Water Act. It will make a lot of ditches jurisdictional, make it much tougher for them to provide maintenance on those ditches. And so those are things that our growers are very, very concerned about.
And that says, well, John Hancock, you see the water problem in Texas and the different water problem in California. Is this a federal issue?
Well, I think it may be a federal issue. I think it's a priority issue. Instead of regulating our farmers out of business, we ought to be looking at providing and making sure that this country has water to drink. And I see what's happening not just with these water regulations, but you look at what EPA is doing to our business climate, our manufacturing capability, and the federal government has become an albatross around the necks of our job creators in this country, and that's wrong, and we're paying for it.
Aaron, Kurt Schaefer was on last week, and he was talking about an issue where he would be more aggressive than Koster. And sometimes Republicans, when you're running against Chris Koster, he's a former Republican, it's kind of hard to find some difference sometimes. Is this federal overreach part of the deal? Is that part of the issue? Is it will stand with the federal government?
Oh, I think that absolutely. I mean, in Jeff City, when we look at a lot of issues, I think this waterway one is just one that's coming up. But time and time again, we're looking at, what are the regulations that are come down? If you're a small business owner, and you're looking at how do you cover, your employees through healthcare, there's a problem. If you're, the EPA continually has problems, and even on the industrial side, with some of the, coal producers, in the state, and Missouri is heavily reliant on coal. They've got issues there. I think again and again, kind of what we were just talking about with the minimum wage, they're trying to offer a solution to a problem maybe that doesn't exist. I feel like that the federal government, more often than not, tries to come up with these solutions to problems that are better left being solved by the states.
Tishaura, you deal with the federal government quite a bit. I know you're very active in different things. are these the type of issues? We're fortunate in St. Louis to have a big river, but other parts of the state might not be such. Is this a federal issue?
So you're talking about my pay grade. I know nothing about ag or ag issues, and unfortunately didn't have the chance to study that while I was in the State House. But I do deal with the federal government a lot on banking regulations and consumer finance issues. And we are currently watching what the CFPB is going to do around payday lending, because that is a huge issue in Missouri. There are more payday lending institutions than there are McDonald's in the state of Missouri. And we have, seriously, and we have to take a serious look at how people are managing their finances and give them other ways for reaching that gap when they get to the end of the month and the money runs out.
Kurt, I want to ask you a different question on another topic. This week there was a story in I guess most of the papers now, kind of attacking the culture in Jefferson City. It seems to me like the media is sort of the same media that did not want you to get in President Clinton's life is now wanting to get into just matters that it's hard to make a stretch to their public. It seems more TMZ-ish.
It is, and I think it's a little bit of jumping on the current issue of the former speaker, but I think it's also the fact that there's a lot of media in Jeff City and a lot of legislators, and I think they come there for 3 days or 4 days a week, and what happens there is Tom Dempsey said earlier, in a fishbowl. And I think they are probably overly, examined in everything that they do. The bad part about it is that I think it really gives a bad impression of people of Jeff City and those legislators. You've got, 163 and 34 legislators, and you have a few people that are not conducting themselves maybe as they should. And as a result, everybody gets stained. And the media, is with the 24-hour news cycle, and you can't get enough information these days. That's a prime way for people to sell, sell newspapers and get stories.
So this isn't a partisan issue. I mean, it seems like people want to fit into this particular thing into their agenda. Is the media maybe getting out of what affects the public and into the personal too much?
We continue to put politicians on pedestals, and we have to remember that we are human first. And because we are human, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have lapses in judgment. And serving 2 years or 2 terms in the Missouri legislature, I saw my share of the stuff that the Post is reporting. Even had an issue myself that I had to report to the clerk about harassment. So. But I think that because we are in this sort of culture where everybody is being watched, people should be cognizant that their moves are being watched and they should conduct themselves accordingly.
Aaron Williard, you work at Jefferson City. Is this starting to leave the issues that affect the public and get into the personal? It's pretty much exclusively.
Well, I think on this issue, you've kind of seen that some. And, my friend John, unfortunately, there's some issues and things that I think were written about John that I didn't think were fair either. But, the thing that I think is unfortunate is there's more of a gravitation towards stories like that and not stories about the personal relationships that Republicans can form with Democrats. There's not these, stories about, hey, look, here was an issue where rural members were able to work with urban members on an issue that helped, an urban area, or likewise helped a rural area. And I think that those are the stories that if you started to see more of that and that was reported, you wouldn't have, the thought from the people that are not paying attention maybe 24 hours a day like those of us who are in politics do. They would start seeing this perception of, hey, there's a lot of good that goes on there. Because I believe there is a lot of good that goes on there. And there's a lot of fantastic people in state government. But we just unfortunately are only, led to see these sensationalized things. And I think that, maybe if there's a step back, and I don't know, maybe that's the appetite for the public, but I believe that there's an appetite the public wants to see where there are some real issues that are being solved by amazing people that have come from all walks of life, from all parts of the state, and they're working together to get them done. And that, I think, is going to be a continual story.
If I could add to what Aaron is saying, Aaron and I have worked together for years, and the first questions we always have for each other when we see each other are, how are your kids doing? Yeah. It's never about politics. I know he has a beautiful little girl, and he saw my son grow up in the legislature. And the good stories are there. I worked with Senator Schmidt and Representative Richardson to pass a bill just this past year that allows you to transfer all or a portion of your state tax refund to your 529. Sent out press releases,
radio silence. So there are people working for good, and it's just never reported.
But that's not news.
Dan, is that the problem, though? I mean, you observed this. Is that the problem, that it's not? It should be news and it's not?
Correct. I was just going to say negative news sells, unfortunately. So, yeah, I too see all those good stories and see people working together. And I think the important thing, I've got some pretty good advice, to always be. If I could say anything at all about the culture, I think legislators need to remind themselves to always be that same person going back home as they were when they came to Jefferson City. I think if you can hang your hat on that and keep in mind, like Senator Dempsey said, how you want to be remembered 5-10 years down the road, I think that should be your guide.
John Hancock, you've served in the legislature. I mean, this isn't a partisan thing. Some of us want to make it about campaign donations. It seems like other folks want to try to fit personal responsibility into their issue. It seems like it's just a bunch of people trying their best and failing like they would in a factory, in a law firm, in a newspaper.
What's different about state government and federal government is you're taking somebody out of their home. Most of us work pretty close to where we live. And you're taking somebody out of their home, putting them in a different city, and giving them some power and an office, and they're important. And, it's a temptation-laden environment. However, I would say that the vast majority of people that are elected to public office in this country and in this state, both parties, are very high caliber individuals. Look at the treasurer of the city of St. Louis. I mean, what an impressive elected official. And we have elected officials like that all over the state who do a tremendous job for their people. And
where's that line, though? Is the line, if it doesn't affect your public duties, it's not public news? Is that the line?
Well, in the case we're talking about now, this is a former elected official. Mm-hmm. It's just not news, and it's certainly not front page news. And I'm well acquainted with how irresponsible journalists can be. I'm well acquainted with that, and this is a case of sadly, irresponsible journalism.
But I think it's got bigger overtones to it in the respect that I've never served in Jeff City, so my part of it is looking from the outside in, and I hear people all the time talk about bad things are going on in Jeff City. You see it in the newspaper, you hear it on the news, you see it on the on the tweeters and the Facebooks and whatnot. The bad news is your Jeff City gets an image, a state legislature, and nobody wants to run. And then somebody who's a business person who's going to retire and says, well, maybe I'll look, do I really want to get into that fishbowl, into that negative, and I've got a great reputation, Tom Dempsey said it earlier. Do you really want to put that at peril by going to Jeff City and get stained?
I think that's an interesting point, and I think that's what a lot of folks as filing season comes up to think about. And that's where we'll have to leave it for this week in Missouri Politics. We want to first of all thank all of our new viewers on KTVO, ABC in Kirksville and Northeast Missouri. We're very glad to have you and want to send a shout out, I think all of us do collectively, to all the fathers out there, especially Mark Fahn back in Butler County. We always love and appreciate you, and happy Father's Day to everyone. Thanks for joining us.